Most people believe their life is determined by a single moment, a decision, an opportunity, a turning point where everything either works or doesn't. They think success is a straight line. You make the right choice, you get the right outcome. You work hard, you succeed. You fail, you must have done something wrong. But that belief is not just wrong, it's dangerous. It assumes that life operates on certainty. But it doesn't. Life operates on probabilities. And until you understand that, you will keep making decisions that feel right, but lead to outcomes that make no sense. Think about this for a moment. Imagine flipping a coin. If it lands on heads, you win. If it lands on tails, you lose. Now imagine you flip it once and you lose. What does that tell you? Almost nothing. It doesn't mean the game is bad. It doesn't mean you made a mistake. It doesn't mean you're unlucky. It just means you played a probabilistic game once. Now imagine you flip that same coin 1,000 times. Suddenly, something changes. Patterns emerge. Outcomes stabilize. The randomness starts to reveal structure. And over time, the results begin to reflect the underlying probabilities of the game. This is the first principle most people fail to understand. A single outcome tells you nothing. A pattern of outcomes tells you everything. But here's where it gets more interesting, because life is not a fair coin. It's not even a simple game. It's a complex system of overlapping probabilities, where every decision you make is less like flipping a coin and more like choosing which game you're playing. And that distinction is everything. Most people are not losing because they are unlucky. They are losing because they are playing low-probability games over and over again without realizing it. They choose comfort over growth, certainty over opportunity, short-term reward over long-term gain. And each of those decisions feels small, insignificant, but each one shifts the probabilities slightly against them. Not enough to notice immediately, but enough that over time the outcomes become inevitable. To understand this, you need to think in terms of expected value. Not in the mathematical sense you learned in school, but in the real-world sense that governs everything you do. Expected value is not about what will happen. It's about what is likely to happen over time. And more importantly, whether a decision is worth making even if it doesn't work out immediately. Let's take a simple example. You have two choices. Option 1, a guaranteed $100. Option 2, a 50% chance to win $300 and a 50% chance to get nothing. Most people hesitate because emotionally, the guaranteed option feels safe, certain, reliable. But logically, the second option is better, because over time, if you repeat that decision, you will come out ahead. Not every time, not immediately, but eventually. And this is where most people fail, not because they don't understand logic, but because they don't trust it. They experience one bad outcome and they abandon a good strategy. They experience one failure and they assume the path is wrong. They mistake short-term randomness for long-term truth. Now extend this idea beyond money. Think about career decisions, starting a business, learning a skill, taking a risk. None of these have guaranteed outcomes. In fact, many of them have a high probability of failure in the short term. But what matters is not the probability of success on a single attempt. What matters is the probability of success across repeated attempts. A person who tries once and quits is playing a completely different game than someone who tries 10 times. And over time, the second person doesn't just have a higher chance of success, they have a near certainty of success. Not because they are better, not because they are smarter, but because they understand something fundamental. In a probabilistic world, persistence is not just effort, it is a strategy. And this is where life starts to reveal its deeper structure. Because once you begin to see decisions as probabilistic, you stop asking the wrong question.
Most people ask, will this work? But that question is flawed, because the answer is always uncertain. The better question is, what is the probability this works, and is the potential outcome worth the risk? That single shift in thinking changes everything, because it moves you from emotional decision-making to rational decision-making, from reacting to outcomes to evaluating systems. And systems are where the real power lies, because success is not the result of a single good decision. It is the result of repeatedly making decisions that have a positive expected value, even when they fail, even when they don't feel good, even when the outcome doesn't reward you immediately. This is deeply counterintuitive, because your brain is not designed to think this way. It is designed to avoid pain, to seek certainty, to protect you from loss. And in a simple environment, that works. But in a complex probabilistic world, it becomes a limitation, because the safest path is often the one with the lowest expected value, and the riskiest path is often the one with the highest long-term reward. So people get trapped, not by bad luck, not by lack of intelligence, but by a mismatch between how they think and how reality actually works. And once you see this clearly, you begin to realize something uncomfortable. You can do everything right and still fail, at least in the short term. But that doesn't mean your decisions were wrong. It means you are playing a probabilistic game. And in such a game, outcomes are not guarantees. They are distributions. And understanding that difference is the beginning of real clarity.
There's a moment that confuses almost everyone. It happens when you do everything right and still lose. You made the logical decision. You thought it through. You considered the risks. You acted with discipline. And yet, the outcome is failure. In that moment, most people reach the same conclusion. I made a mistake. But that conclusion is often wrong, because in a probabilistic world, a good decision does not guarantee a good outcome, and a bad decision does not always lead to a bad outcome. This is one of the most dangerous illusions in life. We judge decisions based on outcomes, but outcomes are noisy. They are influenced by randomness, timing, and variables you cannot control. So when you evaluate your life this way, you end up reinforcing the wrong behaviors. Imagine two people. The first person makes a reckless decision, high risk, poorly thought out, driven by emotion. But by chance, it works. They succeed. The second person makes a calculated decision, well-reasoned, strategic, with a positive expected value. But due to randomness, it fails. Now ask yourself, who made the better decision? Most people instinctively point to the one who succeeded, but if you think probabilistically, you realize the truth is the opposite. This is where understanding probability becomes not just useful, but essential. Because without it, you will train yourself to repeat bad strategies that happened to work and abandon good strategies that didn't. This is how people get stuck. They chase what worked once. They avoid what failed once, and over time, they drift further and further away from rational decision-making. To escape this, you have to separate two things that most people combine: the quality of a decision and the outcome of that decision. They are not the same. A high-quality decision is one that maximizes expected value given the information you have. It doesn't guarantee success. It simply improves your odds. And over time, that's what matters. Because life doesn't reward you for being right once. It rewards you for being right consistently. Think about investing. If someone invests in a high-quality asset, diversified, well-researched, with strong long-term fundamentals, there will still be periods where they lose money. Markets fluctuate. Random events happen. Short-term losses are unavoidable. But over time, the underlying probabilities assert themselves,
and the outcomes align with the logic behind the decisions. Now compare that to someone who gambles. They might win once, twice, even multiple times in a row, but the underlying probabilities are against them, and over time, that reality catches up. This is the second principle. Short-term results can be misleading. Long-term results reveal the truth. But here's where it becomes even more subtle, because most people don't live long enough in a system to see the long-term effects of their decisions. They switch strategies too quickly. They react emotionally. They chase immediate outcomes. And in doing so, they interrupt the very process that would have led them to success. This is why patience is not just a virtue, it is a mathematical advantage. If you repeatedly make decisions with a positive expected value, and you allow enough time for those probabilities to play out, your success is no longer a matter of luck, it becomes a matter of inevitability. But there's a catch, because not all risks are equal, and not all probabilistic decisions are worth taking. This is where most people misunderstand risk. They think risk is something to avoid, something dangerous, something negative. But in reality, risk is the price you pay for accessing higher expected value outcomes. Think about it. Every meaningful opportunity in life, starting a business, changing careers, investing, building something new, comes with uncertainty. There is no guarantee of success. If there were, everyone would do it, and the reward would disappear. So the goal is not to eliminate risk. That's impossible. The goal is to take asymmetric risks, where the potential upside is much greater than the downside, where even if you fail, the loss is limited, but if you succeed, the gain is significant. This is how rational decision makers operate. They don't look for certainty, they look for favorable asymmetry. For example, learning a new skill. What's the downside? Time, effort. What's the upside? Career growth, income potential, opportunities you didn't have before. The downside is limited, the upside is open-ended. That's an asymmetric bet. Now compare that to staying in a situation that feels safe but has no growth. What's the downside? Lost time, missed opportunities, stagnation. What's the upside? Minimal. And yet, most people choose the second option because it feels safer. But this is where intuition fails, because what feels safe is often what carries the greatest long-term risk, and what feels risky is often what offers the greatest long-term reward. So the question becomes, how do you actually navigate this? How do you make decisions in a world where outcomes are uncertain and probabilities are invisible? The answer is not to predict the future. That's impossible. The answer is to build a system, a way of thinking and acting that aligns with how reality actually works. Instead of trying to be right every time, you focus on being right on average. Instead of avoiding failure, you make failure survivable. Instead of chasing certainty, you optimize for expected value. And slowly, something changes. You stop reacting to outcomes. You start evaluating decisions. You stop fearing randomness. You start using it. Because randomness, when approached correctly, is not something that works against you. It's something you can leverage. Just like a casino doesn't win every game. In fact, it loses many individual rounds. But it doesn't need to win every time, because it understands the probabilities. And over time, those probabilities guarantee its success. The casino doesn't rely on luck, it relies on math. And in many ways, that is how you should approach life, not as a series of isolated events, but as a long sequence of probabilistic decisions, where your goal is not perfection, but advantage.
Once you start seeing life through this lens, something shifts. The pressure to be right disappears, because you realize that being right every time was never the goal. The goal was always to position yourself so that, over time, the odds work in your favor. And that changes how you approach everything. You stop asking, what if this fails? And you start asking, what happens if I never try this at all? Because when you think probabilistically, inaction is no longer neutral. It becomes a decision with its own expected value. And often that expected value is negative. Think about someone who never takes risks. They avoid failure. They avoid uncertainty. They avoid discomfort. And in the short term, it works. Their life feels stable, predictable, safe. But over time, something else happens. Opportunities pass, skills stagnate, options shrink. And slowly, without realizing it, they drift into a position where their future is no longer flexible. That is the hidden cost of playing it safe. Not immediate loss, but gradual limitation. Now compare that to someone who consistently takes calculated risks. They try new things. They fail, often. They step into uncertainty. In the short term, their life looks unstable, messy, uncertain. But over time, something else emerges. They gain experience. They build skills. They create opportunities. And most importantly, they increase the number of positive bets they've made. Because every attempt, every risk, every decision is another iteration in the system, another chance for the probabilities to work. And this is where compounding enters the picture. Not just financial compounding, but probabilistic compounding. When you repeatedly make decisions that have even a slight edge, that edge accumulates. A 51% advantage doesn't look impressive. In a single event, it's almost meaningless. But over hundreds of decisions, it becomes overwhelming. This is how small advantages turn into massive outcomes. And this is why consistency matters more than intensity. Because a single perfect decision doesn't change your life, but a system of slightly better decisions, repeated over time, does. Now, at this point, it might sound simple. Just make better decisions. Just think in probabilities. Just focus on expected value. But in reality, it's not easy. Because you are not a purely rational system. You are human. You feel fear. You feel doubt. You feel the emotional weight of failure. And those emotions are powerful. They push you towards certainty, towards safety, towards short-term comfort, even when those choices work against you in the long run. So the real challenge is not understanding probability, it's applying it consistently in the presence of emotion. And that requires something deeper than logic. It requires discipline. Discipline is what allows you to follow a strategy even when the outcomes are temporarily against you. It's what keeps you making good decisions when the results haven't caught up yet. Because there will be times when your system is correct, but your results are not. And in those moments, most people quit. They abandon the strategy. They revert to emotion. They chase something that feels better. But that's exactly what breaks the system. Because probabilistic success requires time. It requires repetition. It requires you to stay in the game long enough for the math to work. This is why survival is the first rule. Not success, survival. Because if you go all in on a single decision, if you take risks that can eliminate you completely, then even a good strategy can fail permanently. But if you structure your life so that you can survive failure, then failure becomes information, not an ending. And once failure is no longer final, you gain something incredibly powerful. Freedom to act. Freedom to take risks. Freedom to experiment. Freedom to pursue opportunities without being paralyzed by fear. Because the downside is controlled and the upside is open. This is the essence of playing the game correctly. Not eliminating uncertainty, but navigating it intelligently. And once you internalize this, you begin to see the world differently. You stop envying outcomes. You start analyzing decisions. You stop asking why something happened. You start asking how likely it was to happen. You stop chasing guarantees. You start building systems. And slowly, your life becomes less reactive and more intentional. because you're no longer trying to control the uncontrollable. You're focusing on what actually matters, the quality of your decisions. And over time, those decisions shape your reality. Not instantly, not perfectly, but inevitably. So if there's one idea to take from all of this, it's this. Life is not a test of certainty. It's a game of probabilities. You will lose sometimes. You will fail sometimes. You will make the right decision and still get the wrong outcome. But none of that defines you. What defines you is whether you keep playing the right game, whether you continue to make decisions that have a positive expected value, whether you stay consistent when the results are delayed, whether you trust the process even when it doesn't immediately reward you. Because in the end, winners are not the ones who avoid failure. They are the ones who understand it, use it, and continue anyway. And when you do that, when you align your thinking with reality itself, success is no longer a mystery. It becomes a matter of time.